we still have potential clients coming to us saying, oh, we know we need to do a strategy, but we just don't have time, or we know that, or we're waiting for this to land before we focus on strategy. Like, you just need to get started.
Hello, I am Stuart P. Turner. That wonderful voice was Brooke Hill, and this is the Flow State Podcast. We are back for the final part of our three-part conversation on brand storytelling. Why is it so hard to get started? We're trying to answer that question today. We talk about why often the brand voice gets lost in execution and how you can make it a bit more real and tangible based on some examples from Brooke and her team. Enjoy.
That's how you stand apart, like your unique way of expressing things is you, and that's what people look to you for. Yes, in ChatGPT 4, you can actually start to train it, but so that it understands how you, like, you can say, this is how I actually express myself, and this is the kinds
that's
of
cool.
But it's still not going to get all the way there, right? So, that's the thing. You do need to, brands will need to stand apart by having a really unique voice and having a really a unique arsenal of stories that they and only they tell. And that's where the value comes in terms of working with people who know more than the machines.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And look, I think, this wasn't on our notes, but you've just made me think of it now. So, like, brand voice and or brand personality is a personal bugbear of mine at the moment, because obviously working in B2B quite a lot, it tends to be something that people seem to work a lot on but don't ever seem to really nail particularly well. I don't know whether it's just because it's designed by committee or because they're also product driven. But how are you currently approaching trying to make people think properly about their brand and differentiating beyond just like the functional stuff, Brooke? Like, have you got any sort of good examples of that, or have you hit on any recent challenges in that space?
Well, yeah, I mean, usually when clients come to us, they know the value of brand voice, and so it's less about convincing them why it's important to develop, and they've kind of already come to us with that. And we also teach in it as well. So we would, like, I've run courses in the past teaching people how to write in brand voice. The way that we do it, I think, the problem with brand voice is that one of two things happen, and this is why people tend to kind of come to us when these solutions haven't worked. One might be that they either have no brand voice, or they've got really basic brand voice, which is like, we've got to be simple and honest and friendly. And, those things actually don't mean anything. And that's just that's how ChatGPT talks. Like, kind of like there's nothing unique or different about that. So that's kind of one camp. And then, and then also sometimes they've had like an amazing writer who really nailed the brand voice, but that person left and they don't have any, right? So no guidelines or crap guidelines. And then they'll have, on the other camp, they'll have guidelines that have been created by creative agencies, which are really incredible in terms of the vision that they have, and they'll be a couple of really amazing examples, but they don't then go into the level of detail that's required for somebody to actually write in them. So they're usually really good vision. They'll have like, these are the three things that we stand for, and like, these are some descriptions of what that means, and then sometimes you might get like a paragraph on how that's expressed, but that's it. So when we do guidelines, we'll do that, and then we'll do do's and don'ts for each of those pillars. We'll do we call them gold star examples, and so we'll provide like a blog post, a social post, everything, and we'll mark up exactly why we made certain choices.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So people have got a template to work from, a best practice to work from, and the reasons why those choices were made. And then we've got on top of that technical guidelines, which goes into like grammar, syntax, like sentence case, numerals through to word banks, words we do and don't use to describe something. So like for you, Stu, your technical guidelines would have very specific guidelines around how you construct your own grammatical sentences, probably slightly correct, but that's fine because it works. And then and you'd have words that you use all the time and words that you're like, oh, I would never say that word. That's a stupid, you know, like that's not me. So it would capture all of that. So it gives a brand and, you know, and a business. So when you're getting other people to write your content, they know how this brand sounds. So I think that's where the gap is. It's just literally people don't like where you're seeing people not actually writing in a brand voice that's useful. They just don't have, the people aren't given the tools and the training and the level of detail that they need to actually be able to put it into practice.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually, because I do feel like a very common problem that I am often engaged to solve is that things falling into a huge gap in the middle of, you know, idea to execution, to put it in really simple terms, I guess, which is exactly what you're describing, right? We engage someone super expensive to do a load of work, and now everyone's like, okay, great, we'll just put that on the shelf with the other stuff and just carry on doing what we were doing before. Which, to your point, is not necessarily because they don't want to do it. It's just because nobody's been like, here's how you connect a very possibly conceptual sort of, you know, something to your day-to-day life at work.
Yeah, I think the conceptual stuff is so important, and like we'll do that too, but I think it's recognizing that there needs to be that click over into practicality, because some people work on that real like conceptual level and they just get it and they just get on with it, but other people don't, and that's not anything to do with them. That's just how different people function and different people work. So you need to have these different layers. Some person, like a really experienced writer, will be able to look at what the creative agencies have created and just go ahead and do it. That's like 5% of the population that can do that. And you want to you want to enable the rest of the population or the rest of the writers to be able to actually achieve that. Otherwise you're just, again, resting your fate in one very experienced person's hand, which isn't the best business strategy.
Where the challenge is for a lot of those businesses, if I am hearing you correctly, is like you sort of, you know, you can't have like your entire brand like resting with, you know, the market person, which I guess is the way it would have been, you know, in times long gone now. But also, if you're going to kind of democratize, I guess, the brand across more people, you know, how do you do that without it becoming diluted or just getting ignored? I think is the big challenge. Hey, and like it sounds like you guys are starting to try and address that with the people that you're working with in a pretty interesting way, which I haven't seen being done across the other companies that I've been sort of chatting to recently, which is quite interesting.
I think the brand is such a powerful vehicle for, you know, we kind of think of it as an outward thing, but actually it's an internal thing. And if you can get your people living it and communicating in it first, then and empowering them and enabling them with all the tools to do that, then you know, it's just going to amplify. So I think it's about it's being able to set the vision, but what are all the tools and the training that's required to, you know, and engagement, like how do you get people having fun with it, you know, how do you get people like back to that fun thing, like if you have fun something, it's gonna be so much more memorable. You know, when we did our rebrand, I took my whole team away on a retreat, and you know, we had like the best time, and all of that stuff, like it just cements everything that you're working for, you know, so powerfully, if you can just show your people a good time, you know. And so that's what the Wonder Think Creative Spark sessions are about. That's why we do our retreat. It's like you learn through fun, you know, you learn through just having a good time.
I'm a big advocate of that as well. I think, you know, back to the point you made earlier about sort of taking things from your childhood as well. Like when you see how little kids learn how to do stuff, I think adults tend to think they're a lot more mature mentally than they actually become as well. So like you kind of forget that whole social play interaction part of how we all behave is how we learn most of the stuff that we actually learn. Like, we're not that far off, chimps just wandering around grooming each other and, fighting in the woods, right? So like, I think that's what, without drifting too far off topic, I think that's one of our current, challenges of our generation / time that we're alive in particular is like you're seeing a lot of like stats about increasing like loneliness and social isolation and stuff and the repercussions of that. And then obviously all the, the COVID dramas a few years ago, like it's a pretty like, I think, concerning trend that people seem to potentially be forgetting just how to like socialize. And then, obviously the more isolated you become, the harder it becomes to kind of step back out. So, I totally agree with you. I think it's just important to remember that, you don't just have to go to an office and ignore everyone and just silently work all day. You can go and, actually socialize as well. It's totally fine. Even though I suppose the corporate agenda might not say that, but whatever. Who cares about them? Let me, I know we're almost hitting time, Brooke, but let me throw a bit of a random news media curveball question at you before we finish up. So I was reading in a somewhat grandiose sounding article about the B2B world. The B2B marketers and sales apparently are now flipping back to brand, realizing apparently that it is the more important place to be investing because of changes in buying committees. Now, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because you and I are from the generation in question. But the two reasons they cited for this was changes in the buying groups in B2B businesses because they are now being filled with millennials, such as yourself and myself now, who have different values, allegedly, to Gen X and the previous generations. And also the fact that, the performance stuff that was being driven before is now a bit of a diminishing pool. So I'll add a link to the story in the studies here. It's come out of a media group. So read into that what you will. The actual study's not too bad. It's by Dentsu. But question one, Brooke, what do you think of that broadly? And question number two, as a millennial, or at least a millennial-minded woman, what do you think the significant differences in values are, versus Gen X / previous generation?
So I'm right on the cusp. Just FYI, I am what they would call an elder or a geriatric millennial.
I think I am as well. I think I've just crept in there. It's fine. We can be geriatric millennials together.
Yeah, look, I'm very controversial, but I find those sorts of articles super irritating because this idea
I'm glad you said that, actually.
brand versus brand versus marketing, or whatever it is. Like I don't think that there needs to be a competition. I'm delighted to hear that B2Bs are focusing more on brand, because I think as the world evolves, we will need to stand apart more. And so how do you stand apart? That's what the purpose of a brand is, to help you be different to and better than your competition, right? It's to help people choose you. That's what, at the end of the day, you develop a brand for. So if we can, if B2B marketers are recognizing that is an important thing to do, well, then that's awesome. And, and that's only going to be more the case if you think about, we haven't really spoken to it, but like search AI, generative search is this idea of, you'll soon be able to go to the internet and get any question answered. And again, that will mean that brands need to stand apart even more, because they won't necessarily, the search won't be generated in the same way that it has in the past. So, and that's just one impact, right? That's just one facet. So brand will become more important. In terms of how values are driven. I see this happening more and more, like with my team, in terms of the way they connect with brands, and the way that they make choices. So again, I do think that brand and purpose are things that people increasingly want to connect to and seek it out. You see it in the stats, but I also see how it plays out in my team and why they make choices about the brands they engage with and why they want to connect with the brand. They feel connected to the clients that we have. Like if they're identifying with the shared values of our clients, then they're so much more invested in working for them. So yeah, I do. So yeah, it's all important, I think is what I'm saying. Another day we can talk about transformational promise and how I think that will be the most important thing.
Interesting.
I'll just leave that little, Easter egg for you.
No, I like that, Brooke, because I think, look, I would happily carry on talking to you about search AI and like the current, Google legal snafu, but I think that's probably a whole other conversation about the more functional side of what we've talked about. But what would you be sort of saying to any marketers who are struggling with, the issues we've touched on, or like sort of trying to stand out or thinking about how they're going to deliver their brand in the new digital media landscape? Like what are your kind of current takeaways, or what would you be sort of advising people to think about if you're having issues in any of those areas? Or is that too broad a question?
No. I mean, what comes to mind is that it is just invest time and resource in the strategy side of things. I still think that there is a strategy gap in businesses. We still have clients coming to us saying, or potential clients coming to us saying, we know we need to do a strategy, but we just don't have time, or we know that, or we're waiting for this to land before we focus on strategy. Like you just need to get started, and you just need to carve out the time. It really doesn't have to be the full bells and whistles. It could be a day. I think, again, people think strategy, oh my gosh, we're going to have, one of the big four come in and spend a year and millions of dollars to create.
Don't get me started. Get me started on them.
But actually, you know what? There's the good, better, and best. Like best, of course, we could come in and help with strategy and it would be a very detailed and robust process. But equally, it could be a day's workshop and we come out of there with some really clear direction and some really clear priorities about what to focus on first. And then you work through it. It doesn't have to be over-egged. So, so I think just, in terms of what to focus on, just do the thinking, and as part of that, get the creativity flowing. Like you've just got to, you've got to do that work. Otherwise, it's all just spraying bullets at a wall and hoping for the best,
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And like, I know going back to my previous roles, like I'm a big fan of like, just as you said, like if you're making the space for it, just thinking about the habits that help you to think. Like I know the common ones, like your ideas in the shower sort of stuff, but you can actually I've found, having tried to change some of my less savory habits for better ones recently, that like you should get out for a walk, like go to the gym, go and get into a different mindset where you're not just staring at a screen and kind of feeling like you have to work. That really works for me, just to let your brain kind of tick over a bit and not really be necessarily actively thinking about stuff is I think a bit of an overlooked sort of easy to do thing. Also it's a good excuse to not do work for a bit, so a double win from my perspective. But yeah, look, I think that's really sound advice, Brooke, and I think if anyone wants to chat to you about any of this stuff, how would they go about reaching you now? What's the best way to get in touch with you if people want to talk more?
Well, I usually just hang out on LinkedIn, so you can look me up at Brooke
where all the cool guys are now, right?
it. That's where we are. One to think on LinkedIn, or our beautiful new website, which the team did a phenomenal job. I can take almost zero credit for it. It looks so lovely, and they did an amazing job.
Look, I think I really like your new brand, actually. So, as you know, I'm a big fan of sort of, high impact-y colours, sort of that kind of design. So I think it's very cool. I think you've done an awesome job with it.
Thank you. Well, yeah, like I said, it's a team job, and Belinda Hubble, who is my creative collaborator, she is the vision behind this, and she did an amazing job.
I love it. Well done, everyone, in that case. Everyone involved. Definitely a winner. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. Awesome. Well, look, I think once again, Brooke, I've covered a significant amount of ground there. I think let's definitely not leave it another year before we talk again. But I really appreciate you coming on. That was super interesting. And I guess, I will put a mark in the diary just to see if our new predictions have come true again. But thank you very much for your time. It was super interesting.
Thank you so much, Stu. Thanks for having me.
That, friends, is a wrap on the conversation with Brooke. Don't worry, she will be back in 2025. I hope you found that interesting. There were some fascinating takeaways there on how AI can enhance our lives, but certainly isn't replacing us yet. Hope you enjoyed it anyway. Tune back in for the next episode in a couple of weeks.